All right, guys, I'm going to start a video real quick. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's doing good. All right, let me get my chat thing in here. All right. Okay, so what are we going to talk about here? Where am I? Let me split screen here. 1 second. Okay. All right. I want to talk a little bit about banks, asset bubbles, Bitcoin, Fiat, and the lessons of Japan. And I'm gonna use this. Richard Burton, how's it going? I want to use my experience in because a lot of people are talking about this Richard Werner thing. And listen, I was there. I was in the front lines of this thing, and I can tell you kind of how it went down. I'm gonna give you kind of a little bit the. I'm gonna use my tweet as this. It's okay. So let me just make sure here. All right. So I tweeted this thing out, and you can kind of see. You can see that you can follow along with the tweet on X. What I've shown here is the price of the Japanese real estate market, and that's in the yellow line, and the price of the Nikkei 225, which is the red line. And I want to show this from 1980 to really 1992, okay, which is sort of the peak years of the bubble, right? That's kind of really when the 91 was the peak, and 92 it started going down. So, I think this is really it's a very important experience, and it's been a while now, right? So it's been 35 years ago, but a younger version of Fred Krueger was kind of on the front lines in this thing, and I want to kind of give you a little bit of my story with it and kind of with Japan, because I'm old enough to have kind of lived through this phase of my life, this phase of the economy, which I think could be relevant for potentially where we're headed in the United States. AGM. Okay, so 1980. I'm still kind of at Stanford doing my PhD. 19. And what's happening here is Paul Volcker. Okay, is Paul Volcker is started in 79, and he's trying to solve inflation. So he jacks interest rates up to 20%. They peak in 1980, and then he jacks them again in 1981. And what happens is the dollar. There's all this money that starts going into the dollar, right? Because the interest rates in the U.S. are so high, right? So everybody wants to take advantage of the high U.S. interest rates. So the dollar strengthens like crazy. And this is, during the first term of Reagan, right? So the dollar is strengthening like crazy. We have these super high interest rates, and the converse of this is, as the dollar's strengthening, the yen is depreciating versus the dollar very quickly, right? And what this does is it gives the Japanese export machine, which had already been, primed in the 70s, right? We'd already started seeing the Japanese cars, sort of take over Detroit, from in 70s, right? Because American cars were not small enough to fit for the OPEC oil embargo of 73 and people, the gas price increase. So Japan was cooking already by 1980. But they just got a adrenaline shot in 1980 because of these interest rate moves in the U.S. So, hey, Thomas, you want to join? I'll give you an invite. 1 second. Let me give you an invite. How do I add to stream. 1 second. Sort of forgotten how to add people here. 1 second. Oh, plus. No, what do I have? Plus. Oh, invite guest. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to send you an invite, Thomas, on X. 1 second, guys. Okay, I sent you an invite, Thomas, on X, and you can join me, and we can talk this over. Right. So basically, what happened is, Volcker starts jacking interest rates up. I don't want to try to really tell this as a story to the best I can, right? And so Volcker starts jacking interest rates up in 1979 to 20%. And you were there, Thomas, I think. You were a little younger than me, but you still kind of remember that, right? Those 20% interest rates.
Yeah, it was crazy time. I mean, I'm a little younger than you, but
Yeah.
The issue for me was as a young man coming out of the Carter administration, you had this huge situation with the stagflation, and so
Right.
as a teenager going into college, you're not really thinking about monetary policy.
No.
But we were thinking about at that time, if I remember, when Reagan came in, we changed the psyche of the country. He really did a great job with that, and the interest rates were just really high. And I remember my parents and their friends talking about them getting CDs at 9 and 10%.
Yeah.
And it was at some level they were loving it, because while inflation was high, I think the CDs they weren't making a connection there. And it was very interesting. But I do remember that. And I was listening before, you were talking about how crazy Japan was.
So let me just back up. I don't want to continue the narrative.
Yeah, go ahead.
You'll get where I'm going. Okay, so 1980, we start having this Paul Volcker induced rate hike. And then at the same time, we have a massive appreciation of the yen, right? So before even the appreciation of the yen, we have a massive appreciation of the Japanese stock market and the Japanese property market, right? So why are these things going up like crazy? Because Japanese was an export-driven economy, and the best thing that they could possibly do was have the dollar go strengthened, right? So the strength of the dollar was fantastic for Japan, right? So we had these sort of two pictures. The U.S. was struggling. You and I were like, oh my God, like you can't find a job. It's tough. Like, New York City was like, garbage was piling up in New York City. Carter was terrible. There was this idea that the U.S. was finished, right? And then meanwhile, in Japan, everything's just booming, just unbelievable, right? So it was exact mirror opposite, right? Like the export stuff was doing fantastic, and Sony was the #1 company in Japan, right? That people forget that. It was like that was the pride of Japan, Sony, right? And Toyota, obviously, for the cars, right?
It was if you remember, it was the car industry kind of looked at the way the U.S. did it. I mean, at that time, the quality of the U.S. cars in the late 70s and early were terrible.
It was.
You remember Lee Iacocca taking over Chrysler? They had that crappy K car, and it was terrible. And now what happened in Japan is the Bell Labs guy, Deming, put in quality control, and they
did this just-in-time thing.
But in Japan, they also had like a thesis that you could not be in car design unless you worked on the manufacturing floor for a few years. So they understood. So like when Honda and things like that came out, you could have any flavor of ice cream you want as long as it's chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. And whereas a General Motors product, they customize every car in the line. There's all kind of quality issues. So at the same time, you have this crazy financial structure. You do have a structural difference between the two countries.
Well, you also have I would say a cultural difference, right? In that,
but Japan was making things that the world wanted and the US was not.
100%.
And that exacerbated the issue. So in the 1950s and 60s, the US was making stuff that the world wanted. But by the time we get to the late 70s, we kind of lost that.
Well, I think we lost it. And, there was part of it was like cultural, was like the Vietnam War, right? It just basically ripped the country apart. There was some people who were against it, and a lot of people were against it. And then a lot of people were like, fuck, I don't want my daughter being a hippie, So there was this kind of clash of cultures, right, that happened. Yeah. And similar in a way to the clash of cultures that's happening now between blue state and red state, right? I mean, we had this cultural problem that we didn't have a uniform thing. And meanwhile, at the same time, Japan was 100% uniform, right? Like you would go to, and I remember my first time very vividly when I first went to Japan. I think it was in '87, right? My first visit to Japan. And I just couldn't believe how clean the place was. I remember stepping on a bus from the airport to Narita Airport to downtown Tokyo. And I saw the guy had these white gloves on, and he's just like, took a notepad. He's like, okay, we have, and I was like, oh my God, like, these guys are going to kill us. Like they're clean, they're polite, they're punctual. They've got their act together, and all of Japan was like that. The first trip. And I was just like, oh my God, like we're going to die. You know what I mean?
Do you speak Japanese at all? Or
yeah. So I took, at that point, I didn't speak it at all, but I actually took 2 years of Japanese, so, which that's another funny story, but they didn't like that. Ultimately, I was telling you, I'm going to continue the story. I'll
go ahead.
Japanese, but so anyways, so I was doing a lot of business in Japan because Japan was kind of the engine. It was sort of like now tech's the engine. Japan was the engine right then, right? So ultimately, everything was happening from Japan. Okay. And, we'd have some business, Solomon would have some business. And I was involved in, when I got into Japan, Solomon, they said, Fred, we want you in international ARB, right? So I was doing international ARB out of New York. And there was only one other person in New York doing it. And then there was a bunch of people in London, and there's a bunch of people in Tokyo, right? So I was very much going to Tokyo a lot. Once a month, to Tokyo, and hanging out there, doing a ton of Japanese business, Japanese bonds, swaps, swaptions, caps, all kinds of cross-currency stuff, right, in Japan. And so I got my first taste of it then. And so if you look kind of on this graph, I kind of caught that midsection of the graph, from 86 to 89 at Solomon, those first 3 years. And then I got an offer I couldn't refuse, right? The offer was, Fred, the Long-Term Credit Bank of Japan. And I'm like, of course I know the Long-Term Credit Bank of Japan. It's it's the second largest bank in Japan. And they said, well, they want to do what you did at Solomon Brothers. They don't know how to do it. They'll give you their balance sheet and you can get 20% of all the money you make. And I was like, ooh. So me and this other guy, we jumped on board and we said, okay, we love that arrangement, right? You're going to give me a balance sheet of a bank that is larger than any United States bank, that is larger than any European bank. Okay. LTCB was larger than JP Morgan at the time, larger than Citicorp, right? Larger than, UBS, okay, Deutsche Bank. So it's it's the second largest bank in Japan. So you had IBJ, Industrial Bank of Japan, LTCM, Sumitomo, Mitsubishi. I mean, we're talking the top banks, right? And they're like,
no way they paid you on that.
What?
They didn't pay you on that.
They totally did.
They did.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah. So the reason I left is I made a bunch of money for Solomon, but I didn't get paid as much as I could. And then I took this deal and I cleaned up. Okay. So this deal made me one of the highest paid people on Wall Street in 1990. Okay. Because
so
it
that
actually
capitalized you. Would you
What?
say that deal capitalized you as a person?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have some kind of point event in your life to make it, right? Like selling a company.
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like this. You know, just working for somebody, you don't usually get it, right?
Right.
So anyways, so I did this thing and I was in Japan a lot and I saw it very much from the front lines. You know, like I was on the floor of the Nomura Stock Exchange. I met the head of the Japanese Ministry of Finance. I mean, like the head. This is like meeting Jerome Powell, you know, for lunch. You know what I mean? Like, Jerome, let's talk. You know, he's like, how do you do your trading? Fred, let me explain how I do my trading.
So how did they treat you? Because it is Japan's a bit of a closed culture. You're an outsider. How did they treat you?
Well, it's very interesting because what they do is they have it's like almost like a ritual dance the way that you're treated, or at least at the time. The way they treat you is you go out you hang out with them
right
for the day, and you just say formalities. They're all just like, oh, formality. Well, now Fred's going to make a presentation. Now Shimizu is going to make a presentation. Now we're all doing this stuff, and then all the actual deal making happens at night. So then what you do is you go out to Ginza and you drink until 2 a.m, and you get completely drunk with the entire teams. And so the way that they work in Japan is they get into this kind of, they bonding, right? And they drink the hell out, and they sort of view that unless you get drunk with them, they can't trust you.
Interesting.
And so basically the US team is on one side, the Japanese team's on the other side. You go to these sushi bars, you just get completely drunk to the point where some people pass out and just sleep on the side of the road. I mean, literally, like that's how bad, they don't catch the last subway home to wherever they're living. But, and then the next day you pretend like you didn't get drunk. That's the problem. And you just repeat that for a week.
That's great.
That's how you do it, right? And then you just get like massages and stuff because you're so drunk all the time.
Now, Werner said this, and I want you tell me because you would know, is that during the day, the Japanese have an agreed upon truth, which
is exactly right, 100%.
And at night, the real truth comes out.
Well, yeah, he's very right about that. So they have a saying in Japanese that, if somebody says maybe, that means absolutely no.
Yeah.
And if they say no, that means, well, they're never going to say no, right? They just never say no. They say it's going to be difficult. That would be difficult. And when they say that's be difficult, it's like you don't have a rat's chance in heaven to ever get what you're looking for, right?
Right.
And then they say we need to get consensus, and then you don't know, like consensus. They all like it's a group decision. So, well, do we have a deal or not? We must reach consensus, okay? But usually consensus is there's a guy who doesn't speak at all during any of the meetings, and he's the guy who just dictates the consensus. So I got very good at understanding Japanese culture and how they work, right? But yeah, so this was my experience at Long-Term Credit Bank, and I got to know the establishment really well. It was just if I told you what they did is they had this rotation system, right? Where basically they rotated people around between departments. So it's very much a lifetime employment thing. So if you come in and you're with this training class, right? Now, if you're one day in front of the next guy, you're always senior to that guy for the rest of your life. That's how it works. So seniority is determined by literally the day, and so it's very ritualistic, right? And they just basically move people around in this organization. So at one point they moved the head of personnel into head of trading. The guy never traded at all. They just said, he did really great in personnel, so we're going to reward him by giving this.
It's his turn. It's his turn.
It's his turn, right? We're going to give this. So, anyways, I mean, they had a professional astrologer there, I mean, you can't even possibly comprehend how crazy it had gotten. Okay, now and
they also have a very strong deference to authority.
Very
So,
strong.
I worked at Mitsubishi Financial Group, years ago, and I think I want to say like the guy Kamita-san, he was the head guy. He'd come in, and boy, everybody got ready for Kamita-san. Yeah, I used to say, tell me how much I'm supposed to bow. There's a 30, 60, 90.
Yeah.
And 30 is what they told me to do. Don't do 60 or 90. That's something else.
Right.
So, but that deferential to authority also leads to this truth during the day, real truth at night.
So anyway, so what happened there is these banks, they lost the plot, right? They sort of lost the plot, and they just basically, it became a very inbred system where they would basically go out drinking out with their buddies, and they would agree to buy shares in each other's banks, right?
Karatsus.
Yeah, the Keiratsu model. And then there was this concept called Zitec, right? And Zitec was also translated as financial engineering, right? So basically, they sort of said, well, we can't actually make anything cheap anymore. we forgot that idea. That was the 70s when we did like Toyota and Sony, right? So in the 80s, what we're going to do is this financial engineering, right? So a little bit like Bitcoin treasury companies. We're going to do, we're just going to add a little this, do some alchemy, and we're going to get it to work, right? So their financial engineering was, we're going to buy, Mitsubishi is going to buy shares in LTCB. LTCB is going to buy shares in IBJ, and IBJ is going to buy shares in Mitsubishi. And we're all just going to keep ratcheting this thing up, right? And we sort of got into this infinite leverage situation, right?
You just described as kind of the way the fine art world works, right?
Yeah, it's the same. All what I'm just saying, all bubbles are, all mega bubbles are the same, right? All mega bubbles, right? And Japan was the mother of all bubbles. It really was. It was the mother of all,
So the Nikkei peaked at like $40,000.
Yeah, and I was on the floor of the Nomura Stock Exchange, or not stock exchange, the Nomura bond trading floor, and I was with the head of trading, and he's like, Fred-san, and I was like, what are they saying on this loudspeaker? And he goes, Mr. Fred-san, yes, they are saying Nikkei now, our head of research now tells us we're going to Super Bowl market, Super Bowl. And I'm like, Super Bowl? Wow. It's already at 40,000. He goes, where's he goes, now officially going to 80,000 now. And I'm like, wow. And he goes, yes, we're instructing all our sales force to go out to all the housewives in Japan and tell them to buy stocks. And a stock in Japan is like a number, right? It's number 17402. That's it. Right. And all the money decisions in Japan are women who make them.
Yeah.
Because money is tainted in Japan. It's bad. So basically, the wife handles all the financial decisions, and the man just coasts along, never sees a bill, never pays anything. The wife handles that, right? That's the culture. So these women, they come in, and there's another woman from Nomura who sells them. It's like, you should buy 17902. That one is really, we're very big on that one. We're telling all the people in your neighborhood to buy that one. They're like, okay, 17902. Okay, I buy. And so, they had this massive sales force, much bigger than anything that I'd ever heard of in the U.S. Right? And they would just go out and they'd promote this idea of pushing into these Japanese equities. So at the peak, which was in December of 91, right? Now, what happened is previously, now this thing had gotten a little bit out of control, and the Japanese, let me see if I have more slides.
Well, so, and Fred, while this is happening, during that peak, Japan is starting to buy shit outside of Japan, right? Then they buy Paramount Pictures.
Oh, yeah. Pebble Beach.
They bought
Rockefeller
Center. They were buying stuff.
Well, yeah, because they had the at this point, right, the yen is strengthening like crazy, right? And I have
Right.
this graph here. So we started at over 200 to the yen, right?
Yep.
And it's like all my time at Solomon, all my time at Greenwich, the yen was one directional, always going up, right? So we peaked down in 1990 at 120 to the yen. And you know, there was this meme in Japan at the time that we were going to go 1-to-1. That was the crazy talk. You know, we were going to go 100 yen to the dollar, and then we're going to call it a dalen. It's just insane. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, this was, there was like comic books written about this stuff, right? So this bubble economy was kicking like crazy. Japan was, and in '89, Morimoto, the guy who started Sony, considered to be the most important person in Japan, right? So in Japan, if you were the best of the best, the Harvard Business School, you got a job at Sony. That was the most prestigious, right? The second most prestigious, get a job at LTCB. I swear, okay? So people would die just to have these jobs. Why? Because if you had a job at LTCB, you had instant social status. You see what I'm saying? And then, so I'll give you another funny story. So I met this guy, and they were going, "This guy is so rich," and I go, "Wow, what does he do?" "Oh, he's like in a public relations or PR or something like that." And I go, "He's so rich, but he's in PR. How much money does he have?" He goes, "Oh, like in your dollar, maybe $1 billion." And I go, "Really? He's got $1 billion? How's that?" And he goes, "His dad died, left him parking lot in Ginza. Parking lot worth $1 billion. And then I talked to the guy, and I'm like, "So you're worth $1 billion. You know, it's worth a lot today, but even back then, it's like 4 billion, 5 billion, right? 10 maybe, you know." So I'm like, you're worth all this money. You're the Grant Cardone of parking lots in Ginza."
Right.
And I go, "So why are you working here 9 to 5 at LTCB?"
It's expected.
And he goes, "One reason." And I go, "Okay, what is it?" He goes, "The card." And I go, "What do you mean the card?" And he goes, the business card. And I go, "What do you mean the business card?" And he goes, "Well, when you are presented to another person in Japan, you show the business card. And you go like this, "Kruga-san, hajimemashite." And you present your business card.
Yeah.
And your business card, if it says Sony or LTCB on it, they go, "Oh, so this thing," you know?
And you hold it so that the person, with two hands, so the person,
so the person can see the full.
It's like you're presenting a bill at a fine restaurant. Here you go.
Exactly. This is who I am. This is me.
Yeah.
I am with LTCB. So it was so prestigious, you know. The level of prestige was crazy, right? And ironically, LTCB, what it means, it stands for long term. Chogin in Japan. Chogin Chinko Ginko. Okay. And of course, it wasn't long term. It actually went bust.
Right.
So LTCB had lent all this money to property developers and a bunch of other things, but it was all sort of tied. It was all one and the same. Everything was correlated with everything, right? And
well, it was a circular closed economy.
Yeah.
That is prone to a bubble that's going to burst.
Yeah. So what happened? What burst it was sort of two things. The first thing was in 1990 we had this interest rate move, and I'll show you. I kind of recalculated thanks to ChatGPT.
Now I know you listened to the Werner interview.
Yeah.
He said what burst it was a phone call from the U.S. saying stop it.
No.
I understand. You say no. I'm just saying that's what he said.
No, that's not correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying that's where I differ from Warner, the CIA, and all that stuff. Here's the thing. What these guys could care less at this point. Okay. The guy from Sony, he had just put out a book called "The Japan That Can Say No." You can Google it. You should read it. This is a very good, short little book. And it was a very important book in Japanese culture. Because what happened in Japan by '89 is Japan has it's a super hierarchical society, right? You know, like, you know, in World War II, you know, the emperor of Japan was considered to be a god. right?
Right.
So you had this hierarchy, right? And so Japanese, they always go, US number one, Japan number two. You know, they really felt they were number two. And then Morimoto, the head of Sony, he put this book called The Japan That Can Say No, because there was this meme saying Japanese will never say no. We can't say no. We're too polite. And then Morimoto said, actually, you can. And it's time for us to take the number one position. We will be number one in the world. We are the Japan that can't say no. And in '89, you started seeing that in Japan. Like the culture was like, screw the US. US is there was this great movie called Black Sun with Michael Douglas.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that? And he's a detective in Japan.
Yeah.
And anyways, so the feeling was like, we got you beat, guys. Like, you're done. We make everything. You're nothing. Okay. We are going to crush you. We're going to own you. We can buy California, you know? And so the idea that the CIA would have any pull is nonsense. They could care less. Right. So I think he's completely wrong on that. And he's an academic. I don't know. I was on the front lines. I can tell you that's not the case. What killed it, there was two things that killed it, right? One was the interest rates rise, right? Which they did because it was just overheating, right? So they'd done too well. The Plaza Accord was too effective, right? So interest rate, they said, we're going to increase interest rates a little bit. It's just going to be, kind of like Powell. We're going to just tweak them a little bit. Everything's going to be great, right? And that was the idea, right? But and nobody thought too much of it then. Like people were like, what do you think of the interest rate? It's fine, no problem.
When Japan went up to 40,000 and everything was so expensive, who did the Japanese get wealthy, or was it the top 10%, 5% of asset holders?
Okay, so first of all, the idea that Japanese, the whole concept of like flaunting your wealth and stuff did not exist in Japan. It's sort of as I kind of explained, the company was the key, right? Like the idea of like an American rapper type guy, like, I'm here in Palm Beach or wherever, like Rolex, Gucci. That wasn't, no, they were into goods like that, but they were corporate animals, right?
So they didn't have an individualistic culture. It was more like, I'm now part of the team.
It was tied to corporate, right? So, and if you weren't part of a corporate, you were like you were really, it was not a good place to be. It's not a good place to be an individual, right?
So contrasting, like the U.S. is dominated by small business. That's where a lot of the jobs are. It doesn't feel like Japan is that way. It's like bigger.
Well, not really. No, it was massive, big, giant corporations, right?
Yeah. And in the pecking order, if you had a job with one of the big companies, you were above the guy who ran a little restaurant in the neighborhood.
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
Right. So, you have to sort of say who got rich. Look, some people had these, everybody in a way suffered equally because like, if you had a 1,000 square foot apartment, that was called a mansion.
Yeah.
Literally, it was called, because the word man means in Japanese, they have a different unit system. So they don't go thousands, millions. They go 10,000, 10,000 times 10,000, which is 100 million, right? That's a man.
Okay.
100 million. So 100 million yen was a man. So they called it a mansion. They thought that was very clever, right?
Right.
And then the next level up is called Iko. That's a 10,000 man. And they called it an Ikoshun. Ikoshun. So anyways, the idea of a mansion was like, nobody had any real, and part of it, nobody had any space, right? So you don't have any space to buy anything in Japan, right? So, which is kind of why they only want like the highest possible quality, so they'll buy like a Louis Vuitton handbag because there's no room to put it in the house.
Yeah. So what do they think about these 5,000 square foot, 10,000 square foot homes in the US? They must think it's crazy, like we live in castles.
Yeah. I mean, they honestly, it was so foreign to their thinking because they think of I'm a corporate man. They call it a salary man. That was the Japanese way.
Yeah. Salary man.
So they go, it's just they didn't care. Like there was not something they cared about at all. Right. So, the whole thing was Japan we're working united as a culture, as a country. Right. And we're doing everything for Japan, and if you're a little bit outside the mainstream, you're, there really is no place for you in Japanese society, right? And so that was kind of everybody dressed exactly the same, right? Literally exactly the same. The same size.
You're not an individual. You're part of a team.
You're part of a team, right?
And you want to be on the best team.
You want to be on the best team. So that was the thinking there was like, team oriented, right? But now I show you the interest rate. So you see here I have, people think, okay, well, the interest rates must have been super low to print all that money. They weren't actually that low, right? So if you look here, right, the interest rate in 1985 was 5%, right? That's short-term rates. And they got down to 2.5%. So we've been down much lower than that recently, right, in the US. And I put the 10-year government bond there too, right, which I was heavily trading, right? And the 10-year government bond was at 5%, which I remember thinking at the time, that is the most overpriced bond in the world. Like, 10-year, like our 10-year now is less than the 10-year in Japan. Okay. So, a lot of these things are, you have to put them in context, is a 10-year at 5% high or low? Well, it depends how you look at it, right? This is kind of at the peak of the Japanese bubble.
I think the lens that you should look at it is probably determined by the growth of the underlying economy, right?
Well, the economy is booming, right?
Yeah. So if you're booming, 5% is low.
Yeah.
If you're not, if you're flat, like anemic growth, 5% is a lot.
Well, okay. So then so I think the other thing that burst this was, I sort of call it like an Epstein type story, right? It was sort of something that had no real bearing or anything. It was this little company called the Recruit Company. And it was a public stock in Japan. And it turns out that they were doing something shady. There was some corruption or something. There's tons of corruption in Japan always, but among contractors, real estate developers. This Recruit Company was caught, and it was a little thing that's just kind of, snowballed, right? Like somebody had paid somebody else off, and that person was tied to the president's nephew, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so basically between the interest rates and the Recruit scandal, it was enough to drive the market down, the property market down like 10-15%. And then we started seeing what Werner points out, which is the system was so heavily leveraged, right, that once you start deleveraging, it becomes incredibly painful. Incredibly.
I think the deleveraging is exacerbated by the fact that a lot of the asset values were propped up through this circular karatsu. We're buying each other's stuff.
Yeah.
And
by the way, somebody on here called Paul says, great discussion, worked for Mitsubishi Corp for years. Everything you're stating is spot on. So yeah. Look, I'm just saying, again, it's like, you couldn't invent this stuff. And if you can't read about this, but I'm telling you, as a guy who's lived through it, it's just like, it seems completely unreal that we went through this in Japan. But what's even more amazing is the next 20 years, right? So I remember very well the fare from a cab ride. In my first trip, I took the bus. And after that, I was like, fuck the bus, man. I'm going to take the cab.
Yeah.
$200. Okay. In 1987, it was $200 to go from Narita to Central Tokyo. You know what the cab ride was? I took the cab ride, I don't know, 9 months ago. It was less. It was like $100.
Oh, wow. That's
Okay.
interesting. So you were just in Japan recently?
About 9 months ago.
Yeah.
I love Japan. It's an absolutely fantastic place to visit now.
I just went there a couple of years ago with my daughter for
Oh, you did?
yeah.
Where'd
We
you go?
went to Tokyo and we did a day trip to Kyoto
Oh, Kyoto. I love Kyoto.
on the bullet train. So that was a funny story because the thing about the daytime truth and the daytime agreed to truth and the nighttime, there's a corollary to that. And I heard, and you tell me if this is true or not, is that the Japanese speak English probably better than you think,
Yeah.
but they won't speak it with you during the day.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story that's very similar to that, right? So when I was at long-term credit bank, I was like, okay, I'm going to Japan so much now. I better learn Japanese, right? So I said, I'm going to get a personal Japanese private tutor to come and teach me Japanese. So I hired this woman, private tutor, and we worked through the Japanese for Busy People, volumes 1 and 2. And then I started, I could read and write Japanese, hiragana, katakana. My kanji wasn't fantastic, but I was pretty good at hiragana and katakana, right? And one of the things that they did at Greenwich was they would sort of study everything I was doing, and they'd make reports back to the head office, like Kruger is saying this, and like they did all this Japanese. And then one guy, this guy Taka, his name was Taka Shinozaki. Taka was like, Mr. Kruger, why do you want to learn Japanese? Why? And I'm like, well, I feel like it'd be good for business because we are very concerned that you're learning Japanese. We're very troubled by it, Mr. Kruger. Please, could you write for the bosses in Tokyo? We'd like you to please write an explanation of why you're going on this endeavor. Honestly, it was sort of like, wait a second, you're counterattacking the empire here, So it was.
Well, just think about it. It's a closed culture, and their language and writing is part of that. And so when you learn it, it breaks down the barriers to their strong team structure.
Right.
So they kind of like that you don't understand it. And I got to tell you, Fred, if I didn't have technology on my trip, I'd have been in deep trouble. I couldn't read anything. I couldn't.
The minute no, I mean, especially when you're in the countryside. Oh, I mean, nobody speaks a word of English. Zero.
Yeah.
Right? Zero. Yeah.
So, but Google Translate was great.
Yeah, I didn't have that in my days. But also addresses in Japan. It's not like the US where you're like, I'm at 112th Street and 113th Street. 112's here, 113 is down here, 114 is up here. It's just whenever they decided to start iterate numbering
when they paved the road.
Yeah, it's like the play, it's kind of like somebody saying my wife is Japanese. It's nuts. It is crazy place. I also spent some time in Kobe. My mother was living there in the Kobe earthquake in '94. So
why was your mother in Kobe?
My mother, my mom was married, had remarried. She was working for. Her husband was working for Caterpillar.
Okay.
And the Caterpillar had a big presence in Japan, so their headquarters were in Kobe. So yeah, I've been to Kobe a couple times too. So I know Japan a little bit. It's fun. It's a crazy place. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's. I love visiting Japan. I love the I love the food. I love the culture. I think it's. I love a lot of things about Japan.
The thing I enjoyed the. It's probably just my personal taste, but I enjoyed the street food in Tokyo.
Oh, amazing!
It was. I love that. I mean, my daughter was young. She was a little finicky about going to Japanese and the Japanese restaurants were expensive. I wouldn't say 2x New York expensive.
When was that?
Probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
It's changed. It's now cheaper because the yen.
Oh yeah. I didn't even think of that. Maybe it's just the places I was going. I stayed at the Hilton in Tokyo.
You can have actually a pretty good meal now in Tokyo for $20. per person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Pretty good meal. I mean, like not just ramen either, like
we did that. We went to, what was other interesting I noticed is that we went to a noodle kitchen and there's a lot of vending machines.
Oh yeah, you pay for it with the
you pay for it in the event and you get a ticket, and then you go into the noodle shop and you give them the ticket. I'm like, what if I change my mind? They're like, well, that's not what we do here. You go outside.
No change their mind.
Yeah. So, but it was I did very much enjoy that visit there. I was surprised my daughter wanted to go, and so I took her, and I enjoyed it a lot because it was a little eye opening. I kind of, it's a nice place to visit. I don't think I could handle living there, but the formality, the structure, the rules, it's kind of like for on a vacation. It's like a game. What do I got to do? Just tell me what to do. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. So let me just finish up my little thing here. So let's review. I kind of go here. We had this Zitec. We had this asset bubble. Everybody was in on it. It was all completely correlated. Everything was thing. They didn't care at all about the U.S. at this point. So the Werner stuff's nonsense. And then we had a pop, right? And now what Werner is right is that who creates bubbles? The banks create the bubble, right? Ultimately, it's not the central banks, because people don't borrow directly from central banks. And the way the banking system works right now, okay, which is a little different than the way it worked even back then, right? But basically, and it's sort of you started this a little bit, this line of thinking. Your thorn of thinking is everybody pools their money together, and and then somebody wants a loan, well, we make the loan, right? It's not too far away from the truth. It's really the question of what does making the loan look like, right? So the bank has a certain amount of banks have deposits, right? And most of those deposits are just, well, they're two types really. They're consumer deposits and they're business deposits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they have that's on the deposit side. Now, on the lending side, the banks can lend to anybody at any time for any reason. They can just say, okay, I've got this guy walked into my office. He wants $100 million. Great. I'm going to give him $100 million. Now,
so can they give them $100 million irrespective of their deposit reserves?
No. Well, not really. And I'll tell you why. So there used to be this, very tight.
Werner said that.
Right. There used to be this reserve requirement thing, but that's not what's driving it now, right? So there's all these other ratios now that have these regulators basically review these banks, and they're basically like, they're trying to figure out if they're too risky or not, right? And the penalties for being too risky are pretty severe, right? They basically say you have to put more of your equity and you have to deleverage and everything else. So these banks are they're very scared of the regulators, right? Because the regulators can shut down banks like they did with Silicon Valley Bank, right? And shut them down, right?
But Fred, just help me understand, because the way I learned the banking fractional reserve system is if there was a 5% reserve requirement,
there's no reserve requirement anymore. By the way, that's over.
So
there's 0% reserve.
So then I can just lend whatever the hell I want if I'm a bank.
No, because there's other constraints. Right?
So there's other capital ratios. There's
other capital ratios, right? So there's no direct, but if anything, these banks are being right now in the U.S. are being too conservative, right?
Yeah. So there's X, and X is some algebra that sets the ratio that limits how much they can lend.
Right. Which I'm saying right now they could lend more.
No. So banks have a capacity to lend, and they're running at say 60% of that capacity.
Yeah.
They're just not lending out fully for whatever reason, and maybe
they're cautious. That's why
the incentives aren't there.
They're de-incentivized. And what the Fed said is, you don't need to lend it out. You can just put your money with us, and we'll pay you interest on it. Right.
Right.
So they're like, okay, I can take money from depositors at 2%, and I can lend it out to the Federal Reserve. Just put it on the Federal Reserve and make 4%. I'll just do that.
Yeah.
I don't need to give loans to some productive business.
Risk-free.
Right. So risk-free. So basically what we're doing, and Loomis and stuff has all this stuff about like, why are we why are we just giving money to the banks? Like, why are we you take your deposit and we're incentivizing you just to do nothing with it, right? We want you to do stuff more productive. Now, the problem is, and what's wrong about, some of this stuff about what Werner's saying is like, we need to regulate you to do more productive stuff. These banks have never done quote unquote productive stuff with it. Like, first of all, you have to guess, where do most of banks' loans happen right now? What would you guess?
I think it's what Werner said, the asset stuff. They're doing.
Okay, but what specifically, U.S. banks, what do they do with their deposits?
Real estate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mortgages, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's individual homeowner mortgages. That's the number one thing they do, right? Then you have consumer real estate, mortgages. You have commercial real estate, right?
Yep.
Consumer loans. So the consumer side of this thing and the real estate side is really big, right? It's over half. It's over half of what people lend out. It's not small businesses. It's not like, it's assets, and that's today, right? That was the same in Japan. It was assets. They lend to assets because they feel like, you know what? Even if the guy does default on his loan,
right?
At least they got the apartment in Tallahassee, the condo.
But Werner was making the distinction of if you have productive loans, like lending money to the pizzeria guy so he can open up another pizzeria, or the machine shop so you can buy.
There are small business loans, but they're competing with capital against people who want that capital for asset speculation. They're competing, and it's a free and open marketplace, right? And
my premise would be that it's not supply side limited in terms of access to capital for small business. It's demand side. There isn't capital formation asking for the money and they can't get it. If I'm a pizzeria and I want to open up another one, I'm not. The thing limiting me is not credit. It's other issues that are limiting me, because it's not like there's this huge demand for. Maybe I'm wrong. For capital in the form of credit, so that business can expand. Now, what Trump is trying to do with the tariffs is force the investment back here to the U.S. to force that credit dynamic for productive credit.
Well, look, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Right?
I don't know either, but that's what I think he's trying to do.
All I can say is Japan turned into an asset economy and then it blew up. Okay. It went from being the most productive country on the planet in the 70s, becoming an asset company, just pure speculators in the 80s. It took a decade, right, to go there.
But it took them 30, 40 years to recover, even if you can argue if they did recover.
And they haven't recovered. And they have right now 220% debt to GDP, right?
So when you say they haven't recovered, that's on paper and number. What's it like for the people who live there? Terrible. How would they view the last 30, 40 years?
Horrible.
So you see it in declining birth rates?
Yeah. Everything. Like the Japanese economy is broken.
So what does the man on the street, what does the salary man, what does he say now? What is his attitude?
Well, not only he's completely screwed, but also he feels betrayed because, well, now they don't believe anymore in these jobs like for life, Right. But when I was there, they were basically selling people, don't worry, the company will take care of you. And then the company didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like the whole ideology is kind of like, what REM calls losing my religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do feel like basically people felt like, oh man, I thought I was going to get, the golden carrot. And basically, the whole system turns out to be a Ponzi, and
it's also generational, right? It's been they've been in bust for so long that I would say people who are 40 years old or younger in Japan, they don't remember any of this stuff. This happened 40 years ago.
Well, right now they've got a whole new problem because with the yen depreciating, versus the dollar, which is happening again now, right?
Yep.
We're at basically 150. Okay, that's bringing a ton of inflation into their country, right? Because they have to pay for oil, they have to pay for everything.
Yeah.
So now we're saying real inflation. So first of all, they had all this deflation, right? Which with all this government projects doing all this work, right? Ralph Werner at work, QE to the Q. Look, all these economists, they always ruin things. At the end of the day, they always ruin things. They come up with these brilliant ideas, and there's all these unintended consequences. Well, Japan right now is an unintended consequence. Like there was guys like Werner out there, and I go back to what Rob Clausen said. In order to have a great country, you have to have great companies. You know what I mean? You got to foster those companies, and Japan has not done that, right? So Japan does not have great companies at all. And it used to have great companies, not anymore.
Well, my observation is they have a huge demographic problem.
Yeah, they do.
Birth rate and
but I think they have they're having the biggest problem they have, and Europe has, right, is that they are not sufficiently pro-business. They've lost the plot as to, you need to have great businesses to make a great economy. It's very simple. I lived for a little bit in North Carolina, and North Carolina gave all these tax breaks to like IBM and everything to North Carolina, and it really worked. It's like they're like, if you're a business, we want you in North Carolina. Same thing happened in Nashville, right? You're a business, we want you to move to Nashville. We're pro-business. Guess what happened? This economies boomed. It attracted people, it attracted young families who could get, cheaper real estate. They're like, I wasn't really expecting to move to the South, but hey, it's
where you go to Research Triangle Park?
Yeah. RTP. But I think that I think what you need, people, you have to, if you look only at macroeconomic numbers and you're trying to tweak, this percentage versus that percentage, you lose track of what we need. Is you need really strong companies. That's what we need. And we need to figure out how we can have really strong companies, really big, not just small, not like noodle shops, but big, strong companies. We need more Teslas, Europe needs Teslas, and they.
So think about a bold initiative that Trump could push. I mean, if he had the political juice to do it, is this to go to zero corporate taxes. Ultimately, the taxes get paid by people anyway. Just get rid of it. The business formation that would happen here, if you do that with tariffs, look,
that's what I do think. If you're at all pro business, you're going to do really well, right? You have to get you have to really favor big businesses, and you have to, I think one of the biggest things they could do would be eliminate the capital gains tax, right? Why? Like you want a booming stock market. Trump's right there, because booming stock market means companies are going to go public. You want less regulations you want to get rid of Sarbanes-Oxley and all this stuff. Like if I was president, what I'd say is, Fred for president, what I want is I'm going to try to make American business greater again. What am I going to do? I'm going to cut regulation. Trump's in favor of that, right? But I'm going to cut like all the Sarbanes-Oxley stuff. I'm going to make it easier for companies to raise money, to get listed. I'm going to cut all kinds of taxes should not be on businesses. Corporate tax, zero. You know what I mean? No need for corporations to pay tax. Companies, people that own those corporations can pay tax. Great, but you don't want to be as pro-business as you possibly can, because if you make businesses successful, that'll make the country successful. That'll make the country rich, right? And you want to reform the legal system so you can't have just frivolous lawsuits and everything else. And I mean, you can look at countries that have built really great economic powerhouses: Germany, Japan, China, right? And all of them were engineered top down to like, we are going to prioritize, we're going to make business great again. That's it.
Yeah.
And and part of what Trump says is good, part of it isn't. Like having these random tariffs, like tomorrow we're going to declare a 35% tariff on, Canadian steel. Like that's not going to help business. Business will want stability.
Yeah.
They don't want some guy like randomly declaring these tariffs. They don't want kickbacks and like. So I don't think Trump's doing a great job, to be honest.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think the ideas could be good. I think somebody else should do it, not him. Personally, I'd love to see a different Republican. I'll vote Republican, but I would like to see a different Republican in place.
You got to also, he's only in 6 months now. He's jerking Canada's chain right now. So it's not like,
I mean, this is not helping. And I think you're seeing it also in the stats, this is why he fired the thing.
Yeah.
We actually are not doing that well, right? The only growth in jobs is in healthcare. This is not great.
That's not productive.
It's not productive. And these tariffs are going to hurt the American businesses. They will. So, it's like what he should do is he should go to the top 100 corporate CEOs and they say, what should I do? Just listen to them. What should I do to make your companies better and more valuable? And they would all say, not one of them would say more tariffs. Not one of them would say that, They're like, okay, I guess we're going to do the tariffs, but,
I would say regulation and taxes are probably the two.
But I mean, in a way, these tariffs are regulated. I mean, they're a form of tax.
I'm talking about deregulation, right?
Right. I mean, I mean, Reagan did a great job, right? He just basically deregulated, cut interest rates. You cut interest rates and you deregulate, you get the Reagan boom of the 80s. I mean, that was the secret sauce.
The thing I think, Fred, we want to avoid as this country is we want to avoid repeating and falling into the trap that Japan did, where we turn into an asset bubble economy that ultimately will burst. And that's not good. I mean, like guys like you and I might be okay, but people who are 25, 35, that range, they're going to get screwed over if we have an asset bubble.
Here's where I'm getting more pessimistic because I do kind of think, look, I do think we're going to head into an asset economy bust. I do think it. And I don't think Bitcoin's going to save us, to be honest. I think Bitcoin may save you and me.
Right.
I don't think Bitcoin's saving the America. We're not hyper Bitcoinizing, that's too long of a discussion. But like this whole fiat system that I just described here, unfortunately is here to stay for our lives.
Yep.
It's not going to, we are not going to be using Bitcoin, at the Bedminster, to play a round of golf at the Bedminster.
That's right.
That's not happening. Okay.
Yeah.
So as much as I'd like it to happen, and as much as I'm kind of pro using Bitcoin and everything, look, Bitcoin's going to go to 1 million. It will, but it's not going to replace the dollar, unfortunately. And all these problems that we have are not going to get solved either, because they're kind of endemic to fiat money, the banking system, and not just fiat money, right? Just the combination of central banks, partial reserve, fractional reserve banking, and fiat. That's sort of the holy triumvirate of those three. And unfortunately, we kind of need all three to keep the thing going, right? Like if you pulled out fractional reserve banking right now, the U.S. would go into a depression.
Yep.
Like it can't survive on its own anymore, right? It's like one of these heroin addicts that just needs like the needle in its arm to live, right? We cannot live without
whatever reform is required. Look, any problem we have with this country, we did not get here overnight, and it's not going to get resolved overnight.
No.
It's going to take years. and perhaps a generation to resolve the issue of debased money. But it doesn't even start until there's a recognition of the problem. And I don't think in the body politic we have a recognition that there's a problem with our money.
No, look, we've got a problem. It's not going to get solved. The only thing I think we have to realize that we can't solve the world. We can only solve it for ourselves. Like, that's it. Like,
yeah,
you know, sort of like, you know, and I mean, it's sad in a way, right? It's sort of sad that, you know, we discovered this great money. Satoshi discovered it, but it's just can't, the system is too big and it's too entrenched. You know, I keep on going back to this Matthew Mazinskis stuff, you know, which is, if you look at the amount of money out there, you know, that $150 trillion of M3
right.
and another $150 trillion of bonds out there.
Yep.
That's 300 trillion. And that's going to be 600 trillion in 10 years. Now, even if we get to 20 trillion, okay, so let's say we get to 20 trillion. That's 3% of the money supply and bonds. 3%. That's in 10 years. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, in 20 years, let's say we get to 20 trillion. I'm sorry, 200 trillion. Let's say we got to 200 trillion in 20 years. Unfortunately, we're now at a 1.2 quadrillion. So we're still only at 20%. You see what I'm saying? We're at 20% of the paper out there in 20 years. It's like, we're not, like, the numbers are too big. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we will lose against, we'll not lose, but we're not catching up in the next 20 years.
If it moves too fast, nation states will declare it a national security issue and you won't be able to own it.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it can move. Look, it's just people saying you're too bearish, blah, blah, blah. Look, I think it's probably going to stay at the power law. It's probably not going to go. If it went any faster, it would be, as you say, problematic. And so, you know, look, I think we just basically have to live with the fact that we are going to be in this really, we're going to have a super appreciating asset. It's going to be absolutely fantastic for people who hold it. But unfortunately, we can't solve the problem of the world with Bitcoin. And so,
what I would say, Fred, is the emerging conversation we'll have as Bitcoin legs up is not so much the Bitcoinization and talk about dogmatic things like Bitcoin's perfect money versus fiat and the end of the fiat system. That will get tired soon. But the issue is going to be,
I'm getting already tired of it. To be honest.
What do you do with the extra wealth? So let's say you become a billionaire.
No.
What are you going to do differently?
You mean when I become a billionaire?
Yeah. That's
when, like when, not if, when.
So you do it. You check the box off. Billionaire Freddie.
Yeah, I don't care. Look, I don't want to change my lifestyle at all. Not one.
You get a jet.
You know, not even. I actually listen. I don't want to be one of these guys who can only fly around in a private jet to places that go to private jets. You know what I mean? Like, I honestly don't really want to change anything. Nothing. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I just want to not get some disease. You know, that's it. That's my life, right?
So like, I just think it gets to this idea of, you know, and again, we talked about this in our Signal group getting ready for Santa Monica.
Somebody said boats and hoes.
Yeah.
I don't want any hoes, and I really actually don't want any boats. I know Josh Mandel's like, I want to get a boat. Like, it's like, oh man, like, it's like there's always the two greatest moments in a boat owner's life is when they buy it and when they sell it.
Yeah, you know, Felix Dennis, the guy who started Maxim magazine.
Yeah,
he wrote a book and he says, if it flies, if it floats, or fornicates, you should rent.
Yeah, rent. I gotta hop. I
appreciate
you coming by.
All right.
I think it was a productive discussion. I think it'll make a good video. But enjoy
absolutely.
it.
See you later, man. Bye.
See you guys. Bye.